Hi, I'm Valerie Ervin, Montgomery County Council President, inviting you to join me for a conversation with Donna Edwards, one of our representatives to Congress. That's coming up next, right here on County Cable Montgomery.
On this show, No Boundaries travels to Jackie's Restaurant in downtown Silver Spring. While staff is preparing for the dinner rush, two influential local women, Montgomery County Council President Valerie Ervin and U.S. Congresswoman Donna Edwards, share their perspectives, discuss common concerns, and look to the future. They began on a personal note because it turns out the two women go way back.
You and I have a very long history together, and I think a lot of people don't know that. So I want you to talk a little bit about your background and how the two of us know each other.
Well, you have to fill in the gaps, okay?
I'll fill in the gaps.
All right, so our dads both joined the Air Force when they were teenagers, and they met each other in Okinawa long before we were born and long before they met our mothers. And they were great friends there. And then we all went different places. My dad, was stationed someplace else. Your dad was stationed someplace else. And as you do in the Air Force, and we traveled lots. And then one day, my dad was driving up to our new duty station at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And right there at the gate, he says, "Hey, I think I know that guy." And it turns out that it was your dad.
Yes.
And they reconnected after, 30-some years, a really long time. And by that time, they each had, a boatload of children.
Yes.
And because I had 5 brothers and sisters.
And we had 5.
5,
yes.
That's right. And so we both had large families, and we, spent holidays together. And that was in Albuquerque when we were just, young people.
We were young. It was in the early 70s, if I remember correctly, and you lived kind of catty-corner to our house, so our families used to play together.
We did.
In the street.
Well, that's what you do when you're on an Air Force base,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And, we just became great friends. And then somehow you moved out here to the East Coast. My family retired. My dad's last duty station was Andrews Air Force Base. And we reconnected all over again.
It's
and now
really
here we
funny.
find we're in politics together.
Well, who knew? I moved to the D.C. area in 1987, and one of the first things I did was call you. And since then, a lot's happened. That's been 24 years. We both have sons around the same age. And somehow, we both ended up in politics. So let's talk about how that happened. Like, there's been a lot of twists and turns in both of our lives. And we're both here. You're a member of Congress. I'm the president of the Montgomery County Council. How did that happen?
Well, what's really amazing, Valerie, is that I think both of us also grew up in households where we talked about politics all the time. And we talked about current affairs all the time.
Yes.
So in some ways, it's actually not a surprise that we ended up in politics, but we're both activists.
Yes.
You did union organizing,
yes,
right?
I did.
And I was organizing out with nonprofit groups, and so the kind of circles that we've made in some ways are very similar.
It is funny because in high school I know that you knew some very interesting people. I want you to talk about your connection to Girl State. And there's a great story about you that I want you to share.
Well, funny how things happen. So I went to Girl State, and for a lot of our viewers, Girl State is a terrific organization that really promotes girls' leadership. And in New Mexico, we had Girl State, and so I went from my high school, and another young woman went from her high school at El Dorado, which is the school that you went to.
Yeah, I went to, yes.
Her name was Janet Napolitano. She was the governor of Arizona, and now she's the Secretary of Homeland Security. And she and I met at Girl State. I actually supported and worked for her campaign at Girl State. And then, we then reconnected as she was the governor of Arizona. I was doing some domestic violence work and met her again then. And it's all that Albuquerque stuff right here.
Isn't that funny?
In the Washington area.
So of all people, Janet Napolitano becomes governor of Girl State, and you run her campaign.
That's right.
So for all the young girls listening, if you're interested in politics, like you and I always were, while you were the president of your senior class at Manzano High School in Albuquerque.
Well, it actually was my 11th grade.
You were in the
year.
11th grade.
That's right.
Okay,
I was in
well,
11th grade, president of my 11th grade.
Okay, okay.
But you,
I was on the student senate in all my years at high school in El Dorado, right down the street from the high school you went to. So, you know, seeds were sown at an early age, and you're absolutely right about our families. You cannot go to dinner at your house without engaging in a very long conversation about politics. And I want to kind of segue a little bit to talk about the fact that you are the congresswoman that represents the 4th Congressional District, which is pretty big. We are so lucky to have you representing us here in Silver Spring. So I want you to talk a little bit about your district for a second.
well, a lot of people don't realize it, but I actually live in the southernmost part of the congressional district in Oxon Hill, Maryland, and we stretch across Prince George's County, but not all of it. And then the eastern part of Montgomery County, from downtown Silver Spring through Tacoma, a little bit of Tacoma Park, and all the way up to Clarksburg and Durwood, almost at the Frederick County line. And so it is quite a diverse district, but with really wonderful and talented people. I say all the time, I'm not like some of my colleagues. I can't go to a town hall meeting unprepared.
Right.
Because we have people who come from all walks of government. And I remember, you know, there's a gentleman who was one of the architects of Social Security. He lived at a senior center right over in Collington. In Upper Marlboro. Another gentleman who was one of the principal negotiators of the START Treaty lives right up in Silver Spring. So we have a really tremendous, you know, smart group of people here in the 4th Congressional District, and it's just a privilege to represent them.
Well, we share the district, and we talk about this all the time about how you have to be on your A game to represent this area, because so many of our constituents work on the Hill, they work in public policy. So when you show up, you have to be really on your A game. And I've seen you many times take on some very, very tough issues. And so I want to talk a little bit about what kind of issues that we share, you as a member of Congress and me as the president of the Montgomery County Council. And I want to start with asking you a couple of things about your background, because I think people listening will see the tie-in. I know that you worked at NASA. I want you to talk a little bit about your background and science and how that's been really helpful to you on the committees that you serve on in Congress.
Well, you know, before I came into Congress, I actually spent several years working for the Lockheed Corporation. I always say before the merger, for those people who remember the Lockheed Corporation before they merged with Martin Marietta. And I was at Goddard Space Flight Center working on the Space Lab program. It was a wonderful experience and a great way to learn about the work of NASA and the importance of space exploration to all kinds of things that we take for granted. Our seat belts were NASA, or our airbags in cars were NASA technology. And today I serve on the Science and Technology Committee, and we oversee all of the work that has to do with the civilian scientific research and development we do in this country, whether that's through NASA or the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST, right here in Montgomery County. NOAA, our weather service, when we experience that severe weather and we get notices, we get them from NOAA. And so it's actually a privilege to be able to serve on that committee now, but also to have the background of understanding what it is that some of our scientific community are doing.
I learn more about you all the time because I never ask you these questions when we're having dinner together, but I think it's really good to share this because it sort of dovetails into this issue of jobs and how we create jobs in your congressional district. And so a lot of those jobs are going to be in R&D.
Well, you know, in Montgomery County, we have the great fortune in Montgomery County and also throughout the state of Maryland of having some of the most amazing research and development that's taking place anywhere in the country. And I think I give credit really to the leadership here in Montgomery County, to your leadership on the council, because what you've done is you've said we're going to make an investment in our future. And so you've invested the resources into incubating, bringing to fruition a lot of that R&D that's going on. And we know that R&D is the future for this country in terms of creating jobs, creating manufacturing jobs, creating jobs in the higher order sciences, and it goes actually through the employment base. And so you find people who come out of high school and they're able to work on high technology manufacturing. They come out of undergraduate school in engineering and getting their PhDs, and they fill in those workplaces. And so there are great opportunities here in Montgomery County, and we have just a great reservoir from the Department of Energy to NIST and NOAA and NASA, and of course NIH, which is sort of the incubator for all of our medical research that's going on in the country.
What do traffic cams, elected officials, and park openings have in common? County Cable Montgomery. CCM is the place for local news and information, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. From live council hearings and county executive press conferences, to in-depth profiles of government programs and services, to shows about Maryland history, parks and recreation, and entertainment. CCM covers Montgomery County, all 500 miles and 1 million people.
We're here to wrap up the news of the Montgomery County Council.
Old scams never die.
We are very mindful.
Here's an update from Montgomery County.
CCM is your county information station. Driving is serious business. When you're talking or texting on a cell phone, your reaction time can be impaired. That's why Maryland passed a law that bans the use of handheld cell phones while driving. If you choose to ignore the law, the results can be perilous.
The conversation between Montgomery County Council President Valerie Ervin and U.S. Congresswoman Donna Edwards continues, starting with a mutual pet peeve.
Well, for those folks who are watching us, I sometimes walk into a room and people confuse me with you. So it's good to see that we're sitting in the same place at the same time so people can see us together.
That's right. And it's not an insult. It's just that we don't look anything alike.
So what about the Congress surprises you the most?
Well, I think one are the ways that you can get little things done that have a really huge impact. And I'll give you an example. When I first came into the Congress, I knew that Maryland was not part of the school supper program. That is, students who receive free and reduced lunch. And in some states, a handful of states, they can also receive supper. And when I found that out, I actually worked with our committee. We have great staff, and we got Maryland added into the list of schools where students who receive free and reduced lunch are also now eligible to receive supper. Seems like something that's really tiny. It was a couple of lines in a piece of legislation, but it makes a huge difference in people's lives.
We applaud you for that. I mean, you've done a lot of things since you've been in Congress, but I want to focus on the behind the scenes for a second. I got to spend a little bit of time on the Hill last year. Tell me what it's like being part of the Women's Caucus, the Black Caucus, being a rising star, which you are in the Congress. Tell me what that's like for you.
Well, you have to find your way, and I think when I came into Congress, number one, I came in a special election and I defeated a long-time incumbent, and so I knew that people had already drawn some conclusions. In fact, there were people who had nicknamed me the Dragon Slayer, and so I thought, well, I want to just bore down and really focus on the work, focus on our congressional district. But I also found that I could learn from people who had been there for many years. I remember the Dean of our Congress, John Dingell from Michigan, pulled me aside and he, just gave me some advice, and he continues to do that. And so there are things like that that, really surprise you. And also making friends on the other side of the aisle. I thought when I came in, I'll probably never find Republicans that I could do things with, and that's really actually not true.
No, I'm seeing you're doing it quite well.
Well, let me tell you a story, Valerie, because just recently I was with Roscoe Bartlett, who represents Western Maryland. He's a very staunch conservative Republican here in our state, and we're actually working together on expanding the research and development tax credit and adding a manufacturing credit. We visited a firm up in northern Montgomery County, Wabtec, that makes signaling technology for railroads right here in Montgomery County. They hire almost 300 people who do that. It's some of the best technology in the world. And Roscoe and I are actually working on something that would enhance the ability of firms like that to get a leg up when it comes to their research and development.
Well, I do know this, that for the members of Congress that live locally, it's a little bit tougher for you guys, isn't it? Because you're expected to show up on home turf all the time.
Well, we are. It's so different. I mean, a number of my colleagues who travel distances, and there's a downside to traveling every week too, but during the week that when we're in session, they are largely kind of on their own. They're catching up on reading, they're getting to know each other. And for the members who represent areas locally, for Congressman Van Hollen and Mr. Hoyer and myself, I mean, we're doing our work on the Hill and then headed out to some community event almost every evening of the week. So it's a little bit more demanding. And apart from that, a lot of our constituents actually work on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
I joke all the time, there's a bus route that runs along Pennsylvania Avenue, Independence Avenue, and when I'm going out to maybe cross to go vote, sometimes a bus will stop by and there'll be constituents on the bus and they wave to me and they yell out the window. You know, it's really great.
Well, I know that there's not much going on in Congress that you don't know about.
Well, I love policy, and I've had the great fortune of being able to work over the course of the last 25 years in a nice variety of professions. I started out when I came out of undergraduate school at the United Nations Development Program, and so had that early exposure to working internationally. Of course, I went to college. My last year of college, I was in Salamanca, Spain, at the University of Salamanca, and so I actually have an attention and attachment to international issues.
Know that.
But see, there you go, something else. But a lot. It means that we're living in such a much smaller world. Whether we're talking about our economic world and our reliance on other countries in terms of what we're doing economically, and our global economic success is tied to what is happening around the world. We also have a lot of international challenges in places where they don't enjoy the benefits of the kind of democracy that we have, and we have plenty of domestic challenges as well. I mean, just locally, things like, you know, transportation. Can we get from one place or the other and get to the PTA meeting and things like that?
Well, you talked about something really interesting, and that is how much time you've spent abroad. Growing up as Air Force brats, we both traveled, and I think it gives you a certain insight into yourself, but also how to get along with other people. And so I know you've traveled a lot already as a member of Congress. If you can talk about all the places you've been throughout your lifetime. I know you've lived a lot of places.
Well, you know, what's really fascinating to me is that having grown up traveling and living in different places, even in the United States, where you live on an Air Force base and people come from all kinds of places. And I don't know about you, but I think I counted up at one point, I went to about 14 different schools. It means that you have to be on your toes in terms of being able to meet people who are different from you and who've had different exposure, whether that's here in this country or around the world. And I actually value the contributions that so many of our members of our community who come from different places, come from different countries and cultures and religions, really contribute to the fabric of who we are. And you know, I think we've lived that, but now we get to experience it and work it too.
We've been really lucky.
If something should happen to you, will they know who to call? Be sure to program an emergency contact number into your cell phone under the name of ICE, ICE, so that in case of an emergency and you can't call, they can.
Montgomery County law requires all bicyclists under the age of 18 to wear a safety helmet when riding or being carried on a bicycle. County police highly recommend that not only children wear them, but adults as well. This includes on roadways, trails, and sidewalks. Bicyclists should follow all motor vehicle traffic rules and signs, including stopping at stop signs and traffic lights.
In this final segment, Valerie Ervin and Donna Edwards pick up where they left off, discussing issues about which they are passionate.
So, Donna, I know you're passionate about so many issues, and you can just probably tick off 10 right now, but there are two I think we both agree on, especially in the districts that we represent, that are really important to the people that live here. One is transportation, and the other one is education. So I know you're passionate about both these issues. So I want to start with transportation first, and just let you talk about why you're so passionate about this issue in particular and how it impacts your residents.
Well, I have to tell you, I mean, even though my son is now, he's 22 years old, and it's a long time since I was taking him to daycare, I think what moved me most about transportation was the fact that when I had to work and get off from work and rush home to pick him up from daycare, I was late almost every day because I was stuck in traffic. And when you're on a fixed income and you're late every day picking your child up from daycare, it's $1 a minute. It's probably gone up by now. And I remember the times when I didn't have a car and I had to stand on the side of a highway to catch a bus to get to work, breathing in the fumes because there weren't such clean buses, but also not having bus routes that really served the community. And so I actually understand what so many of our families are going through all around the Beltway, just the challenge of going from one place to the next place. You know, if you're a senior and you don't have a car, you know, how is it that you get around to meet your daily needs and responsibilities? If you're disabled, how do you do that with sporadic, you know, and intermittent service? And so I'm passionate about this because I think that when you get your transportation system right, you improve quality of life, you improve your environment, and you improve your economic prospects. And so I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I wanted to be on that committee so that I could focus on things like the Purple Line and making sure that we get the federal dollars that we need to be able to develop a transportation infrastructure that's going to allow us to be successful.
No, it's really good to hear you sort of talk a little bit more about yourself too in that regard, because I know both of us have something in common, and that is we spent some time being single moms. And so for you to talk about your experience standing on a very busy highway waiting to get a bus, I think that's really important for people to know about you as a member of Congress, because you've walked in a lot of the same shoes that the people you serve do. And I think you should talk a little bit about that, because I think that makes you such a strong voice on all our behalf.
Well, you know, Valerie, I think like you, I feel really fortunate to be where I am right now, but I also know the long road that it's taken to get here, and it reminds me every day of the struggles that families have all throughout our congressional district and throughout the 2 counties that I represent. And that is, how do you get up every morning and make decisions about how you're going to take care of yourself and your family? And you know, as I do, as a single mom, it's sort of double the effort. And it requires, you know, a lot of backbone and a lot of work. And I think you've done as I have, and you know, focus on things like education, for example. You know, how is it that we can best educate our children so that they can be competitive, so that they don't wind up in a really bad place like some of our young people do? And I think that when you bring your life experience to the work that you do, when I bring my life experience to being a member of Congress, it keeps me focused. It keeps me grounded. I bet you find the exact same thing in the work that you do.
Oh, there's no question about it. You know, I have a lot of colleagues who probably never had to experience the same kind of things that we did, which is living paycheck to paycheck. I think that's really very important, as you just voted on a budget in Congress that's going to do a lot of damage to a lot of families that were very much like our own. And so to have you be there and to understand what that's like around a lot of members who are millionaires, a lot of members of Congress are millionaires and could never understand what it's like to walk in the shoes of the people that we represent. So I just think it's really extraordinary that you have that experience.
Well, Valerie, I always know that the story that comes out around this time of year, we do our financial disclosure forms, and those are public, for the public. And I always look forward to being at the bottom of the list of members of Congress who have any wealth at all. But I'm proud of that. I mean, I get up and work for a living. People in our congressional district who have far less than we do get up and they work for a living and they take care of their families. And so I want to make sure that we have a budget that includes support for Pell Grants for poor children to be able to go to college, a lot of them first-generation children going to college. I want to be able to have a budget where we know that we're actually providing services for women, infants, and children to make sure that they can go to the farmer's market and buy fresh fruits and vegetables to grow healthy children. I want to make sure that we have the resources there to make sure that we're educating our children so they can be competitive for the 21st century. And I mean, this is not child's play, so to speak. I mean, we have a lot of work to do. How are we going to grow our economy? How are we going to make our communities thrive? How are we going to keep Montgomery County at the top on all of those lists? I mean, I celebrate Montgomery County all the time, and when my colleagues say, well, what do we need to do on X, Y, or Z? I say, let's look, just go across the border. Let's look at what's happening in Montgomery County, and that's through your leadership, but also the commitment of the people who live here who want a better quality of life for themselves and their children.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that about the county's leadership on education and transportation for that matter, but this sort of brings us full circle in the conversation because as you talked about families that we represent, a lot of these families are struggling, and many times the Pell Grants are the only way that their children have access to a college education. In my own family, I'm the first person to go to college and to get a master's degree. And for me to be sitting here today talking to you as childhood friends who have come such a long way, it's just so gratifying to know that we can bring all those experiences. I mean, nothing that we should be ashamed of, but things that we should celebrate about our lives. I just want you to address this issue of your own personal journey through your education, which has been pretty extraordinary.
Well, I loved school when I was growing up, but part of the reason that I loved school is because I had educators who really inspired me to learn. I mean, I go back to my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Robinson. I mean, she gave me the most fantastic start, but it didn't happen alone because I also had parents at home who, even though they didn't have a formal education themselves, really valued education. They valued learning. I was a reader all the time that I was growing up. I mean, I'd have a book in the car, a book in my room, a book, in the window when I was doing dishes, because my parents really valued that kind of learning, and that continues today, and it's what I hope I pass on to my son. But I think so many more of our families really deserve that, and certainly our young people deserve that. And I got it at home, and I'm very fortunate. And then that made me say, well, I want to go to college and be successful, and I want to go on to law school, and now to be able to be in public service is just, I mean, it is it's a high water mark. Yes. That's for certain, and that as well. But I think it's because we had those values instilled in us when we were growing up, and that they're really core values: to appreciate education, to appreciate the people around you, but also to know that you also have a responsibility to your neighbors, to your community, and each of us can find something that we can do to make people's lives better.
Well, that's great. Well, I want to move on to something fun now, because summer's coming, and your family has a great history of doing a couple of things. One is your famous camping trips, and then your mom's love of going crabbing. So I want you to talk about your camping trips.
Well, we have always camped, and I think it's because my parents actually convinced us that camping was really fun, because they had 6 children that they were carting around the country, and so we got to know every federal and state park all around the country, because they couldn't afford to put us all on a plane. But it turned out that was actually a great time for us to be together, and we've actually continued that tradition. And we have a great camping trip that comes up 4th of July in Assateague, and you're supposed to be there with us. So we're looking forward to
the last time I went to Assateague, we were in a horrible storm.
That's true, but it isn't always like that, and it's great fun, and it's a great way to bond. And so whenever I can get a fishing rod out and get a crabbing net going and pitch a tent, I'm there.
Well, it's been so great to have you, Donna. You've just made my day, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thank you.